I've discovered in the past couple of days, there's a game series called Baroque, or rather, there is a game called Baroque that was for the PlayStation 1 and Saturn that featured this sort of like very kind of like gothic-y bio horror, twisted metaphysics kind of setting. I think of it as sort of maybe like a bio horror kind of Drakengard. That sort of dismal setting, and this was in 1998. I don't believe a sequel has properly been released in this series since then. There was a port to the PlayStation 2 and the Wii, and the Japanese version of the PlayStation 1 original was re-released on the Japanese Nintendo Switch store. Other than that, there was like a typing game. There have been a couple of visual novels. But they decided to release a hyper-casual game that's basically Frogger on the on mobile devices, and this happened last year. There's like zero promotion. The game is very strange, very strange. It from an accessibility point of view, not like accessibility, disability accessibility concerns, but in terms of knowing what you are doing. It is very hands off. Does not tell you how to play it. Does not tell you what you're trying to do. Does not tell you what your ultimate goal is. Just leaves you to it, and you can figure it out pretty quickly. But it's very nice and refreshing to see a game in this format that genuinely is not that concerned whether or not you have your bearings right at the start, because I feel like that sort of tutorializing is something that a lot of mobile games struggle with. If you go to GDC and listen to some talks, I think the Plant vs. Zombies developer has a talk on how to get a mobile game tutorial to feel good and to be brisk and to orient people. And then here you have on the other end of that spectrum, developers who make a mobile game and shove it out there like, well, whatever, do what you want with it. And I am always, in my own work, an advocate of kind of, advocate? I don't know. I do this in practice. I don't know if I recommend it to other people. The David Lynch Eraserhead method of promotion, which is to leave it running at a midnight showing in a theater for 2 years, and eventually it'll gain traction, which it did. And that's sort of how I treat my own sort of press. But so to see something else that's doing that is really interesting, and I think on a future stream we'll look at that once I get far enough along there to have something to show. But so for the rest of this pregame show, so I've got the same couple of books from last time, and also we're going to look at another Santo movie. This is Jose Olivares's Promises of Gold, and I finished it's you see my using the book jacket as a free bookmark. The first half of this book is in English, the other half is in Spanish. It's the same poems but translated into Spanish from English, because I believe English was their original version. So I've finished the English versions of the poems, and I'm going back through and rereading the ones that I really liked. And I think soon, as it's really nice to have the English and Spanish here at the same time, so that as I'm picking up more Spanish, I'll be able to visit that a little more intentionally. Heather Levi's The World of Lucha Libre, an anthropologist's look at lucha, and explaining it for folks who are both high-minded enough to kind of want like an anthropological look, and also enthusiastic enough to enjoy it in first person without having to have the pleasure mediated with your brain. And also Rosario Castellanos' Book of Lamentations, which continues to be amazing. Evening Swimming, I am glad that you showed up, because this is the right time to bring this on. Here we are, Santo, el enmascarado de plata. In Asesinos de Otros Mundos, Killers from Other Worlds. Or killers of other... Not killers of other worlds, they do not kill other worlds. But they are killers, and they are from other worlds. And that is who Santo fights. I almost said Samson, his English localized name in the films. it's very strange that Santo had Samson as a localized name for the U.S. market, because as a cultural sort of icon for folks who know it, he still has, you know, American cultural penetration as Santo, and so it's interesting that he had a localized name. But yeah, so this is very strange, as many of these movies are, and this is strange for reasons that the other ones are not. It's strange for its own reasons, and I will say I think this is one of the weaker Santo movies that I've watched, and at this point I think I'm up to 10 out of his out of 50, and it's a little meandering. It's unclear, more so unclear what the actual source of conflict is, based off of the structure of the movie. This is one that I did not find English subtitles for, so of course that would help. And I went back later and kind of read a summary. And even with that knowledge, it's still a bit strange. So yeah, so the credits have this very very novel and interesting way of decorating themselves with these sort of cutout silhouettes of Santo. I don't know if these were maybe photographs or stills they took of him and then decided to do a drawing silhouette around. But yeah, it has him in various wrestling poses. They're drawn around the credits. But so there are two sources of danger in this movie. One of them, and I assume that all of them are the killers from other worlds. The most persistent threat appears to show up on our world primarily, and it is basically the Blob. For those who don't know the Blob as the 1950s movie, that this sort of acidic gelatinous mass that would consume people and leave behind skeletons and that sort of thing. So there, actually, Swimmy, that is a monster that produces some of your favorite things, skeletons out there in the world. But the practical effects on this are remarkably low budget. It is the Three Kids in a Trench Coat school of practical effects, because it is literally just a few ponchos sewn together with like 10 members of the crew underneath. You can see their heads there. All right, going backward. So you can see there again, these are different shots from different places of the movie, but you can see that those are their heads. You can see the fabric stretched as it is being pulled between them. Here you see the monster attacking a couple of mobsters, and here you see it advancing on somebody in their bedroom, because it is, you know, it will get you where you work and get you where you sleep. But it is very obvious, like even there at the bottom, you can kind of see somebody's hand, like they're sort of crawling on the ground to create this. And so that practical effect, it's very funny and very charming. And even as it is assaulting this man at bed, even he seems to have difficulty keeping a straight face. There, I don't know if the direction was to look scared, but you can kind of see him grinning there. And that's a close-up of him as he is being assaulted. He will soon die, this man. And this is the last look on his face as he is incredulous and amused at the monster that is going to kill him in his own bedroom. So yeah, he tries to pull out a gun. He pulls out a gun. He succeeds in pulling out the gun and tries to shoot the monster. That is the attempt. And possibly does, but what are you gonna do? That thing it eats human flesh. Are bullets gonna stop it? No. So of course, these murders are in the newspaper, and Santo is called in because it's a little beyond the police's ability. This is amazing. I rewatched this this 3 seconds of the film several times because I find this transition so strange. Evening arc, this transition is so strange. The prop is so unusual. It is basically the red phone that Commissioner Gordon would use to call Adam West Batman. Not so much the bat signal. Bat signal's sort of like a call to arms. This is the discreet communication. So the head of police goes over to this cabinet that's on the side of the screen, and he opens up a door, and as he opens the door, a model of Santo's head with the mask on it swivels out, and you see him reach toward the mask, right? But it does not stay there long enough to see what he does with it. It just cuts immediately to Santo's face up close. This mechanism is never referred to again. And bear in mind, this is not him summoning Santo in some way or reaching out into his mind. It kind of is. There are several different ways to contact Santo in these movies, and this one, they just sort of reinvent it each time. But it is a model of Santo's head that he interacts with, and it's not like he summons them. There's nothing magical or technological here, because it immediately cuts to Santo driving his Mustang from way out in the countryside into the city because somebody called him on the Santo head. And what is also strange about this, as genuinely interesting as this is, it cuts so quickly from this moment to this that you almost, if you blink and you miss it. It's such a strange version of this device, this sort of like superhero police, Scotland Yard calling in Holmes kind of thing. It's such a strange version of that, and it's given so little time. So Santo comes to the rescue. There he is. That's how you know he means business. And one of the signs that the film had some very interesting directorial priorities. Santo has arrived at the police station. He is our hero and our protagonist. He is there at the moment of getting information about the whole reason he's been summoned. And the camera decides to follow a secretary for a good 3 minutes as she goes down a hallway, goes into this room to get some documents, and then brings them back. And presumably the document getting action might not be what people expect the attention to be if Santo is the main draw and Santo has arrived. Nonetheless, that is what is done. And also, very strangely, so she gets the documents, gives them to her boss while Santo is there. Boss then gives it to Santo. Like it's very funny in how kind of distracted that whole thing feels. But what does not feel distracted is I mean, the setting, the sets in a lot of this are really lovely. I love the lush reds that are in this, from Santo's cape to her dress to these seats and these placemats. That plus the sort of bronze and yellow tones and the sort of like gray blues that are around in the table and the curtains. It's very compelling. It's very attractive, very, very nice to look at. So then we get to the first battle sequence, probably one of the only battle sequences, where Santo is he's kidnapped by some gangsters. It's a recurring theme in a lot of Santo's movies where he's fighting a mobster or a mob gang. And this is very dreamlike. I can see somebody poking fun at it for being lo-fi, which clearly, as the practical effects on the Blob appear, that's a justified reading of this. Nonetheless, taking it as an experience and not trying to be a little smarter than the movie, this is a very dreamlike, very surreal and strange set piece. So the guy knocks Santo out and brings him to this location where you can see the shadows in the backdrop there. This is not a warehouse. They're not in a warehouse. They appear to be outdoors. So you can see the sort of star patterns on the black background there. it appears that this background is in fact intended to suggest a night sky, as you can see there. Even while the lighting is casting big shadows, so it reminds me of Kagemusha, Akira Kurosawa's Kagemusha, where what's his name? Oh my gosh, legendary Japanese actor who's in Harakiri. He was the bad guy in Yojimbo. Anyway, there's a dream sequence in there where he is stumbling around and is supposed to be in this sort of outdoor space, but the outdoor space is constructed in a studio, and you can see the shadows, so it is both an indoor and outdoor experience, and this has that sort of same feel to it. And Santo is wrestling. This is where the killers from other worlds appear to come in, because this guy has a golden throne out here in the middle of nowhere with a control panel on it, and he presses a button and a warrior appears to fight Santo. Here you can see Santo getting the better of him. But so there are 3 of these. The first is a guy with a sort of a round buckler and a spiked morning star, and Santo overcomes this and gives him a good old heave-ho. And once and Santo doesn't take him out. Once Santo gets the better of him, the mobsters just shoot the guy. So we summoned you from Mars or wherever, and you kind of lost a brawl, and we're gonna kill you. Guy number 2 has a spear and a net. I think maybe some of the otherworldliness of them is communicated in the fact that everybody else, their costumes are sort of playing it straight in terms of being people in human society in Mexico circa 1960s, 1970s. But they all have costumes that are extravagant in the same spirit as Santo's. So yeah, and then he gets him in a headlock and gives him a good noogie, and then he fails. And number 3... it's just a guy with a flamethrower. It's just the fury. So yeah, they presses a button, and I don't know where this guy comes from, but he's just a guy with a flamethrower. And he's just shooting fire at Santo. Santo gets the better of him by taking the spear from the other guy that's fallen, throwing it at him, and impaling him. As he impales the guy with the flamethrower, it's the sort of thing where the guy with the big gun is now a loose cannon and shooting his own guys. And then Santo picks up a gun. This happens infrequently, but it does happen, where Santo is just like, okay, you know what? Wrestling is great, and that's my primary mode, but let's get this over with. So he just grabs the guy's gun and mows down everybody else, including the guy on the throne, who is the mobster. And so that is the only part of the movie, and this is like, it's like a 10 to 15 minute sequence. It's the only part of the movie where he actually appears to be fighting killers from other worlds. It is unclear to me whether or not this blob is from other worlds, because if it is, we do not see it arriving from other worlds. This blob, this happens twice in the movie. Santo gains access to a mob's headquarters. Inside their headquarters is a labs, and inside these labs are these little pedestals with these little sort of like brain mold things on them, and those are the things that when they're exposed to oxygen get really big and turn into the big blob things. So maybe they're connected to each other or in some way that I'm not quite clear on, because again, I was only able to sort of follow this through summaries because I didn't get this with subtitles in English. But yeah, so things go awry very quickly, and this consumes this man, and Santo runs away. Santo does a good infiltration sequence. Here's the other lab in the other mob part of town. Inside that little fishbowl up top, you can see the brain sponge-like thing that it will eventually turn into a blob. And I also really like this gray sphere that it's on top of, because it reminds me of the Mr. Saturn. It reminds me of the Mr. Saturn shaped spaceship that Ness and company enter as robots in order to go, I think, back to the past to fight Gygas. And anyway, so it sort of has a Mr. Saturn shape to it, and I think that's very charming. But yeah, so Santo shows up, and I guess only uses guns when he has to, because he is a perfect video game fight guy. Guy gets in the future. Okay, then yeah. Well, that's what this reminds me of, the future time traveling device. So yeah, apparently only uses guns as a last resort, because despite the fact that guns are loaded and available after he takes them down, he doesn't use them. Just continues to use the environment for pro wrestling. As we are here escaping the blob. The blob chases them in some increasingly dreamlike sequences. Here's, I think maybe they sprayed it down with a hose to make it look particularly gross. It chases Santo over rooftops that are completely abandoned, and Santo eventually lures it into a cave, finds an underwater reservoir, gets into the water, holds up a detonator, kaboom, and drives off into the sunset in his Mustang. And what is strange about this is you feel good about Santo being a kind of a clever superhero in this front. At the same time, like, at least 10 of these things have been unleashed in the world, and he had killed only one of them. So it leaves the open question, what of the others? But that is never answered. So again, a whole lot that I really dig about this. Very, very strange and dreamlike in many ways. And again, this is such a great path to be going down. But with that said, it's going to be a shorter stream tonight, and because I've got some traveling to do, I need to do some packing. Unfortunately, next week's stream, we'll need to skip the stream next week because I'll be out of town. But yeah. We're ready to get on to Hi-Fi Rush for about, I would say a good 45 minutes at least.